Hello. Welcome to Why Not Both, the podcast all about how our multiple passions and interests shape our identity and our lives. My name is Pam Schaefer, and I am a musician and therapist in Los Angeles, and I also happen to be your host. This podcast is produced by Laura Studeris, and for this season, we've partnered up with Under the Radar magazine. If you like what you hear, you can hang out with us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at WNB the podcast. And if you really, really like what you hear, please support us on Patreon. We are under Why Not Both podcast. When you join our Patreon, you get a whole bunch of really cool behind the scenes stuff and you get to chat with us. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy our interviews. For this week's episode, we got to talk to musician and all-around fascinating person, John Vanderslice. I hope you enjoy this interview.
Here we are, lost in the weeds.
Welcome to Why Not Both, where I'm fascinated by the art behind your head because it matches the paint on the wall so beautifully. And I know
it's totally haphazard. It's just like, there's that's an original, the Firebird Suite. It's like a London records. It's like a pressing from the 50s. It's a really good sounding. I have a lot of classical records.
Yeah.
And then that's just like my friend Joe Williams did that art. And then it's just, it's just like the color palette of my life. And this shirt, kind of in there, my hair.
Shirt and your hair. That was what was so fascinating, is that I was like, you and the art and the wall, everything was so congruous.
Like I choose all the colors in the house. So it's like, there's like a color palette that I kind of like, and it's very similar everywhere.
So that's amazing.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about color lately because I've been kind of like redecorating in my place and it's because I'm actually going to be getting a new place soon. And so I wanted to almost kind of like demo different colors in this space to see how I felt. So that it's almost like this is my EP, and then like the next place is my album.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, I want to try it out, and I'm so curious, like, what speaks to you about those colors? Like, do you have the same colors, say, like in your bedroom where you want to go to sleep, or are they like?
Here, I'll show you. So there's only 3 colors in the whole. Oh, and by the way, I have to, because I have like a friend coming at 12:30 on the nose. So
we are all good.
Yeah, good.
All good.
So here's one color. See this blue? So there's only 3 colors. It's like a periwinkle. Yeah. And then there's this kind of like toothpastey green. And then there's like this red. So these are the only colors in the house. And then they repeat over and over and over again. So you get to another room and it's like, here it is, the toothpaste again.
The toothpaste is back.
And then you get to another bathroom and it's like there we go. The blue
periwinkle.
So
cool.
And then I think, first off, where do you live?
I'm in Los Angeles. So I've been demoing in my home, like different color palettes and different spaces of it, because during the pandemic, I do love the condo I live in. It's my family's condo. Like, they grew up in WeHo. I love it here.
Yeah.
It's too small to basically be recording music in here and podcasting. And I run a therapy practice that went from just 8 people.
Yes. Yep.
So
you
it's
need
like
space.
It's all in one room. And I'm like, oh God. And so like, I need more space, but I've been thinking a lot about, because I've been inside here so much, how much my environment affects me.
Yeah.
And it has always been quite pleasant in here, but I was thinking particularly about like how color can affect your mood and all sorts of stuff. So that's, when you showed me the different colors, which color is in like kind of your creative rooms? Like, it looks almost like the brighter one, but then there was one that was red.
Well, it all changes. And I live in like a mansion. So I live in Filipino town. So I live in LA. Yeah. And so I'm like, I'm like potentially very close to you if you move to Legion Heights, because I'm, it's just, where you've lived here your whole life, where I
am. Yeah.
So I'm like right near the old bootleg,
that was my parents' furniture store, my grandparents' furniture store in like the 1950s.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I'm on Parkview, right? So I'm between Beverly and Temple on Parkview. So I used to, when I first moved here 3 years ago, I would walk to the, I knew the owner and Sid the cat. So I was just on the guest list permanently.
Oh.
Yeah. And then, and because the bootleg, LA has a club problem. There's a lot of bad clubs here, and like,
yes.
And, bootleg was like, didn't sound good, but it was like a great club. It was like a very, very positive place to go.
Yes.
Which can't be said about a lot of places. The Echo is like truly depressing, It's depressing, It is. It's like, and like, I'd say most clubs here are, Troubadour is okay, but locationally it's fucked.
Oh my God.
And it's like, no one's going to the West Side. You know what I mean? You couldn't drag me to the West. There's no way.
No, no, it's really like, it's like a state event anytime I go to the West Side. Like, it's the whole
It's such a big deal, right?
Whole day.
It's the whole day.
Because you have to plan to get there. Then it has to be worthwhile once you get there, because you're going to be there for a few hours, because you don't want to just hop back in your car and drive like another 2 hours.
And the West Side is why people don't like LA. Like people don't know anything about, people are fucking stupid about LA. Like, honestly, like when anyone opens their mouth about LA, it's like especially on the East Coast, I'm like, you may not know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Like, and that's okay. But like, you know what I mean? Like, people don't do that. People don't feel comfortable to talk about other cities in that way. Somehow, like, it's like open season on LA, like the way that before 9/11, people felt that way about New York.
Yes.
They could just freely diss New York,
Yes.
And
where are you from?
I'm from Florida, another place that people have literally no idea what they're talking about, because it's like, Florida's in the tropics. If you can't be happy in the tropics, I personally will put you down. You know what I mean? I will send you, I will send you on that long night, because you are not a functional animal. You know what I mean? You're not good for your partner. You're not good for your friends. You're not good for your family. If you can't be happy in the tropics, you are a sick beast, and you need to be put on an ice floe and kicked out into the fucking middle of the lake.
That's such a Floridian kind of like sentiment. I kind of love that. Like, my entire experience of Florida, I was like, I need to experience more of it, because it was going to an ex-boyfriend's cousin's bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
And really what I remember of Florida is just how big my hair got. There's something about the humidity there that my hair was like, it was like cartoonishly, like, I mean, I have a lot of hair, but it was, and it's naturally wavy. And so it was hilarious, because instead of like, it's nice, like kind of mermaid jam, it moved outward in ways that I did not know possible.
Yeah. Yep. I get it.
That was my main impression of Florida, because otherwise it was just a whole family extravaganza.
Where'd you go?
I think I was near Miami. Like, it wasn't in Miami proper, but it was close to Miami. And that is what I remember, is getting ready for this bar mitzvah and being like, my hair is as wide as I am tall.
Yep.
I was like, wow, okay.
I get it.
This is a style. This is a vibe. I feel like I'm in The Nanny. Like, this was how she was teasing her hair to look, but mine just did it.
Yep.
Okay. But I'd like to experience more of it, because I think that I have theories about why people judge LA. I don't know about Florida, because I'm not from there, but like, some ways when I was younger, I was like, oh, people are jealous of LA. But someone said something that I found interesting, which that it's almost like how we malign beautiful people.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I feel about how people dunk on LA.
Yeah.
Where it's like, they know it's beautiful. They know it's a dream. They know all these things about it. And I mean, it also has other aspects. Like, LA is not a homogenous city by any means, but
it's 83 cities.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a joke to even talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, for outsiders, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, people are insane to think they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I've
well, I would say there's a corollary to what you're saying. I would say that that most people know that they would be, by the standards of beauty in LA, which may be stricter than in New York, most people maybe have this baseline that they would be judged harshly here, which fuels a certain type of animosity towards LA. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is like a fitness mad, like a city filled with people that make money, partially because of their looks. You know what I mean? Like, like in all kinds of business, like TV, film, music, modeling, whatever, like Instagramming, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think there's that, that joke. I'm like an 8 in Ohio, a 6 in New York, and an LA shoot on site, like, and so I think I do think that that's part of it, and also I think that there is this feeling too, that like, there's so much media that's come out of LA. There's so much of the American reality, like the international dream of the US has been like printed from LA. It just has like every, probably like 90% of like, big budget movies in the past 100 years have been like set in Los Angeles. Like if you really like aggregate US media, like in empire output, and there is just a feeling of like, that's a lot of oxygen for one city to take up. Do you know what I mean? Like, listen, Paris is resented deeply outside of, you know what I mean? Like, it's too much oxygen. It's just like the kid that's gotten like, the kid that got a free ride into where, to some Division I college, and the other 5 siblings are like, fuck this dude. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like literally our parents only talk about this one brother of ours,
LA is quite accidentally the golden child.
Yeah. Okay. Am I messing up our schedule here by chatting? Right?
You are doing exactly what the podcast is. That is good. You're doing podcast well. You are.
Okay, good.
It's so funny because several people have asked me that, but the whole structure of the podcast that it originally started off, like prior to all the gestures to everything, that I was talking to people who are in multiple fields and how that informs our sense of identity. But now there's such a smooshing of fields and such a smooshing of identity that occurred.
Yeah.
That I like to just talk to people about what's on their landscape right now.
Yeah, love it. That's great. I just don't want to mess you up. Yeah. As long as I don't mess you up, I'm good.
I appreciate that. No, I'm trying to think of if anybody has messed up the podcast. I mean, there was one time when a helicopter went by. That was
a big mistake, right?
That was a terrible mistake.
Well, I mean, but listen, honestly, like a lot of people are boring. Like, no offense to humans, but like, a lot of people are extremely boring, and it may not even be their fault. It may just be that they talk too slow. Do you know what I mean? It may just be that they're actually like don't want to say anything that will ruffle anyone's feathers under any circumstance, or they're just not wired very hot. God bless them, but not everyone is interesting. And by the way, there's a lot of like super interesting people that you wouldn't want to be friends with. So I'm not saying that like it's really just only good to be interesting, because there's a lot of people that I think are fascinating that I really don't like. So
I was talking with someone about Elon Musk, where I was speaking to that, where, I don't villainize people. I mean, I think that
I do.
Like, I think there's good and bad in everybody. And some people, the bad is more prevalent than the good, for sure. I was saying about it though, and I don't know if you feel this way. That's funny that you're just like, oh no, I can cast people as villains. Like, I'm curious what your thoughts are. That I was just like,
just on one, and we don't need to talk about him because he's a snooze, but like the actual like political, component and his like his impact, in the past 10 years, it's truly horrible. It's awful.
Maybe I could cast him as a villain with that knowledge. I'm just
I think you would not hesitate. If you listen to that True and Unserious, I think you would be like deeply distressed because he's not, just like Jeff Bezos. Elon Musk isn't going anywhere. These companies are like part of the American landscape. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be siphoning off billions and billions and billions of our tax money in the future. So, and if we think his end game is just like reducing carbon footprint, we're totally delusional. I mean, the end game of Elon Musk is to sell you oxygen on Mars. That's what he wants to do.
Well, I guess for me as a person, it's so baffling to wrap my mind around operating that way. Like, it's so antithetical to how I operate as a just as a person navigating the world, that I'm
because you're a good person. You're like not a psychopath, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the problem, is that like people who aren't completely sick and cynical, you know, just can't imagine like how venal George W. Bush is, or how truly cancerous Ronald Reagan was, or Barack Obama, or Joe Biden. Do you know what I mean? Like war criminals, all of them, like deep war criminals, you know, like just, if you just look at like our tally in the Middle East in the past 20 years, it's unfucking believable, you know? And like, I just say no to all of it, you know?
And I was thinking, as you were speaking about like what the value is of villainizing people, because in some ways like that I'm trying to think of how to put it, because it sounds strange to say it's positive to villainize people, but it's almost like, where's the line where you're just like, no, like you have crossed the line into villain territory? Like where is that like unredeemable line?
Well, I mean, I think that if you're doing like, you know, active like war crimes, then that might be one.
I was like, just like, I'm writing in like my little mental ledger, I'm like, war crimes, where the line for villainy lies.
I mean, we spent $3 trillion in Afghanistan. I just want you to and like, what did we do in Afghanistan? Just like think about like what we've done, what we've accomplished, what's left, who died, how many, like what $3 trillion could have done had we wanted to actually sustain life. Listen, there's one issue: climate change. That's it. If you think there's anything else going on, if you think anything else matters, you're crazy. Like they're talking about 20. This is getting dark, but when we can shift to other stuff, but like they're looking at like 2040 as being like a huge tipping point. You know, like where you're starting to get like mass migrations, water wars, stuff, which is already happening. And like, listen, Ukraine is part of this. You know what I mean? Like water is a big part of this. It has to do with Crimea, and it also has to do with shale, and it has to do with, you know, we know what it has to do with: reserves and international water rights. And like, these are resource wars, you know? And like this shit is going to get so weird and so violent really, really quickly that, you know, it feels hard to let go of like Miami and New Orleans, but in like 20 years, no one's going to be like worried about letting go of like major US cities, because things are going to be so chaotic. So that's where I'm at with villainy. Do you know what I mean? If we're just out there like playing like Risk or chess, you know, these old senile old men, you know, are just out there playing like their weird, you know, like proto video game geostrategic bullshit. Right. You know what I mean? Like, like could anyone just tell us what we were doing in Afghanistan? Like, what was I'm like, I can't. Right? Like, what were we doing? Like, what were we doing in Iraq? Like, first off, we were siphoning out unmetered oil by the, you know, the container ship for sure. But like, again, it's all about like carbon footprint. Like, we're just shooting it's like we have a gun to our head and we're just like, let's go, baby. I want to die. I was talking to, it's interesting because my parents are like, they had me later. So my parents are in their early 80s. And I was talking to my dad about this exact issue. Like, he was hanging out with me and one of my friends, and we were talking about the human, it's like the human incapability of holding something that abstractly bad in our minds. It's like we have to have like a negative consequence, and then that negative consequence has to almost like keep occurring in a way. It's almost like after the Northridge earthquake in LA, afterwards, it was such a catastrophe. Like right afterwards, like people were very much about like earthquake safety and retrofitting and like all the prep for it. But once that fades, it's hard for humans to hold that in their minds because it's so distressing that it kind of nerfs your ability to do anything else. So kind of holding that kind of stress in your mind is sometimes impossible. However, it means that then we ignore threats that aren't immediately present. And so like we were talking about that in the aspect of climate change and of, you know, like our generation, and like my friend who he's even like a few years younger than I, and he was saying, you know, like we have a very different view on it than say my dad's generation, because for us, it's kind of like,
hey, live it up, while we can and take care of our planet, because we weren't the ones that were in charge of trashing it. And so we're like, we're trying to take care of it. And we tried to tell you about this even as kids, and you chose not to when we weren't in power. So we're doing everything that we can to like remedy that. But at a certain point also, like people, I think, misperceive like, and I would say Gen Z more than millennials, this like sense of almost like cheerful nihilism about it. But it's the only way to cope with something when you're like, well, we've been handed essentially like a shit sandwich. And so what are you going to do about it? We're going to, of course, like fight for it, but we're also not going to deny the reality of it. And so it's very interesting because people that I've talked to, different generations, say things like, well, why aren't you following like a more traditional path? Why aren't you doing all these things? And it's like traditional markers of success no longer exist. And also on this like accelerated timeline of extraordinary change during our lifetime, why would we follow that blueprint? Like that blueprint is for something else. And so there's a very different way of thinking about it where it's like, it's not perceived, at least for me, as nihilism to be like, hey, like we're acting in a way that our planet is not going to be able to sustain this level of human life. And there's going to be giant catastrophes and change. But it's also like, in some ways, it's a way of coping with the fact that things are about to big change. Things are already changing, and to ignore that change, it's a human defense mechanism, so you can keep functioning. Totally get that. But it can be balanced with then acknowledgement of that change and positively engaging with it instead of just having it be like a source of either background stress or denial. Like,
and also deny, if you're like 20 years old, like you're just also clearly denying this, like this fantasy that, let's say, recycling, that your individual responsibility has anything to do with climate change. Do you know what I mean? That like you need to like compost and recycle. And so everything is like offloaded from like Chevron and,
yes, like,
BP and like these like, and Raytheon, and the US military, which is one of the world's largest polluters always,
Yep. I noticed that. I found the title of, because your publicist, it's so funny. It's so weird getting like publicist blast because like,
oh yeah, Nick is great. Nick Salter is the shit.
Awesome. Yeah, I was texting with him. I'm like, I'm so sorry, my neighbor's kitchen exploded. I was like, don't, I'll be right there. Like I was tempted to like send photos because they look even more disastrous than it actually is. We had to cut a hole in my ceiling, like one does.
Damn shit.
Sometimes love that for that. Just but yeah, like it was interesting now getting these things because I never anticipated being in a way like a music journalist, because like I've been doing music for years and doing therapy stuff for years, and like so I'm in kind of like the creative arts and in the healing arts and all those things. But seeing now like the other side, it's so much fun to read about how someone writes their story and about how someone then tells a story about another artist. And I was looking at your press release, and like I was looking at the title of some of the songs, and like Raytheon was mentioned, and I loved that you like referenced like all the dark web stuff. I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I know a lot about the dark web. I will say that.
I was just like, that to me is fascinating. I've dated, I don't know what the crossover is of like creative arts and the sciences in that way, but I've dated a lot of coders and programmers and things like that. And I'm curious what led you to the dark web?
Well, it's funny because a lot of like, there's a lot of like sciencey people that they're really pro-drug, because they don't really they can just like look at like evidence and look at numbers and toxicity and just be like, oh, if I'm going to do drugs, this is safe. And if the safest place to get it is from the dark web, there's like, like this, these number of people per year are locked up for receiving drugs, and it's in these states. People can be very logical about it and kind of transcendent of like this generalized dare style fear about drugs or drug like acquisition,
Yes.
And I just don't like, I'm like a nervous artist type, but I also just don't care about the law. I'm a like anti-authoritarian person. So as opposed to approaching it logically, I'm just like, I hate the US government so much. I want to undermine the rule of law as much as I can. And I want to teach people as much as possible how to like take control of their own, their own sovereignty of their consciousness, and their own body. Like, I'm sorry, but you can do like, if they're going to put lead and mercury and SSRIs and hella drugs and hormones into the LA County water supply, just like every other municipal water supply. And, you know, microplastics, and I probably said that, but like, if they're going to do that and tell you that you can't like take MDMA, do you know what I mean? It's just like, it's like, are you fucking kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, so I just like bought like a 7-stage water filter and installed it in my place. And so I, do that. And then I also just buy peer-reviewed drugs on the dark web. It's not easy, but it's like, it's maybe one of the smartest things that I kind of like, in a life of questionable activities, it was one of the smarter decisions that I made, because I like drugs, and I hate druggies. I hate drug dealers with a fucking passion. I hate drug addicts. It's like handle your drugs. You know what I mean? Like, we can be like, don't act like you've been here before. Don't fucking ruin the party. Don't, you know what I mean? Like, if you take out your dad's car when you're 14, don't fucking crash it. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to do it right, and don't make it this look bad. So that's my whole philosophy. It's just like, I am of Dutch heritage. I'm probably as much Dutch heritage as any, it's like, who cares? I mean, I have like a, anglicized like Dutch last name, but like, there is something about this like self-determination, this kind of like self-responsibility that the Dutch have, and that you see it in Holland when when there's no guardrail in front of the canal, so you can just pull up and drive right into the canal. And who do you think does that? Dumbass drunk tourists. You know what I mean? But like, the Dutch themselves, they have incredibly low overdose rates, incredibly low drug usage rates. Like, they're like, let's work, let's get work done. They're like a merchant class. You know what I mean? Like, they, when they're kids, they play board games of like, Dutch East India, like, like, you know what I mean? Like, starting opium wars, and like, you know what I mean? Like, but like, so I just have a little bit in that in me, where I'm just like, take responsibility for what you do. Don't do it too much, keep everything in check. I'm fairly anti-alcohol, and I'm very, very pro-drug. And I don't have this like I'm, pro ceremonial drugs, but like, don't do hard drugs. I don't buy that either. That to me is like, there's no good or bad drug. That to me is offensive, because there's really good hard drugs. Do you like need to get addicted to heroin? I would say you should definitely not get addicted to heroin. Like, I'm going to
on that one.
I'm just going to say, like,
controversial opinion stated here.
and I'm just going to go out and say it. Like, if we grant you the keys to the fucking castle, you can make choices. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that like by like pretending that drugs are some dark, evil force that we can't control, and therefore you need to be arrested if you do them because you don't have any agency in this world, that just fuels this completely bizarre relationship with drug use, where it's not about a health issue, right? It's about like an inner weakness, or so I question the idea. It's a little annoying for me to say this, and I'm sorry, because someone's going to write me, but I do question the kind of the general universe around addiction. You know what I mean? Like, I think that like I de-emphasize that in my own like thinking about drugs. And I, emphasize and bolster this idea of like, if we talk about it as a health issue, what you put in your body, whether it's food or drugs or any other substance or municipal water, and we take responsibility, then, and like, this is predicated on the idea that we live in a socialist empire, and that everyone has free education, free housing, free healthcare. That's never going to fucking happen. So here we are. So we've got like someone cooking meth, maybe 60 yards away from me on my street. And it's a complicated reason why he's in that tent. So I'm not stupid. You know what I mean? Like, right. I get it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not dismissing all this stuff, but if we were able to have a much more responsible and adult conversation about drugs, I don't know how anything could be worse than the current, problem in the US. I mean,
You brought up something so interesting to me, which is people's relation to substances, but also people's relation to their own body and their experience and the agency that they have over their body and their experience, which like, to me, like that was remarkable when you said that, because like that in my mind is linked to things like either addiction or like drug misuse, where it's like if you don't have agency over your own experience, that might cause you to make decisions that are not good for you or for other people, because you feel helpless, you feel like you want to regain control, or you feel really disconnected and you want to check out. Like there could be all sorts of things that, like, if that relationship is out of alignment, and relationship to different substances is going to be out of alignment. And so it's like, if you grant people agency, but also I think what you also brought up was important, if you don't have the resources of education or of safety that make you feel like you can be at home in your body, like it's really difficult to do that. And so that might be why some people it goes awry, because I have a very similar view to you on drugs in general, where I remember going through the DARE program and being like, in a way, one, like I had certain friends that they were like, this made me want to do drugs because it's very exciting. Whereas my reaction to it was like, this is kind of farcical. But I think that also I might have had just a very different perspective because my parents are both retired DAs. So like, I thought it was a bit silly. It was like watching the Shakespearean drug program. I'm like, that's not how any of this goes. What's wrong with you? And so like, so it didn't have the intended effect, I think, really on any of us. But like, what I find so interesting about what you said is that it's like that person cooking meth on the corner in a tent, there are other things that have gone wrong that have not supported that person, which is probably why they're at a tent cooking meth. Like
since age 0. Do you know what I mean? Like this country is fucking ruthless. You know what I mean? Like,
because most people aren't like, yes, time for my 10 o'clock meth cooking in a tent. Like you have other options. If you have other support, if you have other resources, most people are not going to do that. And so I feel also very similarly about like what you want to ingest and how you want that to affect your body, and doing that with purpose. Like what you were describing, I was like, I personally, you know, especially given the way that people have like cut drugs with other drugs, all sorts of stuff that you don't know what's in your body. I like peer-reviewed drugs. Peer-reviewed drugs sound like the way to go. Like I'm just 100,
like absolutely 100%. And you know, they say that like addiction is the opposite of connection, which I think is very, very interesting. Like if you have something to show up for, you know, if you have community, if it's like, it's just much less of a problem. And I don't know how you could do worse than the Western world with alcohol anyways. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't even know why people bother talking about other shit. It's like, we've definitely, through the generosity of the Sackler family, we've managed to get opiate deaths up to, you know, or opioid/opiate deaths up to 100,000 a year, which is fucking crazy. But that was generated by US Pharma. And that was generated by the FDA not doing jack shit for decades. You know, and like Sacklers were involved in Valium, like they you know, Purdue, and that, like they know what they're doing. Like this is a grift that's been going on forever. You know what I mean? And like, so, you know, the whole thing with this like snitch cop showing up in my junior high school, this DARE cop, I remember thinking this motherfucker probably beats his wife and is an alcoholic. So like, you know, like what's the moral compass here? You know, who's the authority? You know what I mean? Like cops are some of the most evil fucking people in the world. You know what I mean? It's like if you just look like at the aggregate misery that these people have leveled on neighborhood after neighborhood, and that they're enforcing drug laws is crazy. There shouldn't be drug laws. Like this is completely, I mean, there should be laws about, you know, food safety and drug safety. Definitely. I'm not an anarchist. You know what I mean? But these are not criminal issues. These are health issues.
Well, and I look to see, like, in the things that you're talking about, I look to see when I see problems like this, I look to see who's gaining power and who's gaining profit. Like following that, I look to see who's benefiting from this and why. And it's very sad to me that people do profit off of other people's pain, or that people do then gain power and a sense of agency by having power over others, instead of like having that internal locus of like, okay, I can dictate my own actions, and that is good enough for me.
Like,
and that, it's very, I don't know. When you were talking about like the self-determinism of like Dutch culture, I noticed that in Iceland too, where it was interesting to see how some of like, I was in what I would best describe as a sulfuric hot bog.
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
Oh God, I can't wait to go back. I miss my friends there so much. They're all really lovely. And also Iceland is like a whole microcosm of like a sci-fi planet, but on an island. Like there's just all these things.
I gotta go there, right? Like, don't I have to go there?
Oh, you must. It is imperative. I'm telling you right now, like I felt strangely immediately at home there, which is very interesting. Being from LA, could not imagine a more different place than Reykjavik.
Yeah.
But I felt so at peace there and so at home and so curious about everything. But what I found so interesting in this one place was like, there's just hot, whatever it is, bubbling out of, the bogness. It's raining and sleeting and I'm watching bogs, but like the guardrail ends at a certain point and there's like, trails up the hill and whatnot. And my friend explained that he's just like, this is much like the black sand beach that I showed you. They don't send rescue crews to the black sand beach because the rescue crews will die trying to rescue people in the water. Much like if you go past where the little walkway is, that's on you, buddy. And so it's this attitude of just like, not, everyone out for themselves, but just like maybe use a little bit of common sense.
Yeah.
And so
maybe we do better.
Yeah.
And also maybe we do better with actually, with being granted agency. Yes. Maybe humans actually rise to the occasion and kind of like, sharpen up a little bit, like this is good,
Yes. And it's hard. Like, I don't know if you've had this experience. I am sometimes, my friends describe me as being they're like, sometimes you're too kind. Like I'm kind by nature, but like, I have difficulty sometimes like setting a boundary and letting people do stupid things because I'm just like, oh no, but what if I can protect this stupid thing? But
that's
it's like
not
sometimes, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, sometimes you gotta, I explained this phrase to my dad and I can't wait for him to use it on his octogenarian friends. I explained fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
And my dad was like, what a great phrase. And so I can't wait for him to say it to someone, but yeah, it's like, I have difficulty sometimes being like, I gotta let them fuck around so they can get to the find out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Because that you might just have a life lesson there, and it's, we all, this is how you build a life,
Yes. I'm currently witnessing one of my friends go through the find out phase. And I'm like, oh, that was a brutal find out, but like, I'm glad you're there.
Yeah. Yep.
It's tough though. Like, I think that might be why we tend to put up guardrails and things like that is we're just like, no, I want you to just believe the find out from hearsay. Like, maybe you don't have to find out. I found out. Maybe I can tell you.
Yep.
I'm curious, do you do the research for the podcast you mentioned? Like, do you do the research for it? Do you do the research? Was it like, tell me more about that.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you mean the TrueAnon thing that I mentioned before?
Yeah. Is that your podcast or is
no, that's just, it's a podcast that I was, I know the producer, Young Chomsky, and we did a podcast together, but I was a fan of that podcast before we started working together. So it was like a long kind of relationship. I met that producer, I think the first time in 2005 when I was like playing a show.
Oh, God.
So I've known that producer he's a great person. He's a really good friend of mine. He's actually visiting LA and he's coming here. He's the person coming here that I have to, because there's like, do you know Kaveh Zahedi? Do you know the filmmaker Kaveh Zahedi?
No.
You know him? Okay, that's too long to get into. But so TrueAnon is, they're just a great like investigative, lefty podcast, and I'm pretty obsessed with them. But me and Young Chomsky also did a podcast together. I mean, it was 99%. It was actually his heavy lifting, but it was a history of Tiny Telephone, the recording studio I owned in San Francisco. Oh. So it's like a 5-part pod that was basically like produced by TrueAnon. And it's a really, really good podcast. It's like extremely entertaining. And it's, it's a history of the studio, and they're like Mountain Goats is in it, Tune Yards is in it, like there's Lemony Snicket's in it, like there's like crazy people interviewed in this podcast. And it's John Congleton. It's like really, really fascinating. And it's just a history of like a very unusual and chaotic art space in San Francisco in the middle of the mission that survived for 23 years.
Wow.
Because we were like resilient scammers, basically,
Well, the mission, I mean, what years were you there? It's fascinating to me because my sister lives in the Bay Area. And so like, I'm up there a decent bit.
Tell her I'm deeply sorry that she has to live there. It's really, really sad. Where does she live?
So my sister and I are a tale of, wow, these people have the same sense of humor, but could not be more different. She lives in Marin, actually.
Where in Marin?
San Rafael.
What does she do?
So I'm the only not lawyer in my family. My sister originally was a lawyer and was doing asbestos litigation and hated it.
Whoa, shit, yeah.
Yeah, so she stopped and then went through a journey of, how do I summarize in a TLDR? I gave her a CD of Harry and the Potters as a joke for Hanukkah one year, and she became so obsessed that she ended up helping run Harry Potter conferences.
Whoa.
And discovered she was really good at event management. And so she did that. But then she like shifted gears because she wanted to focus on having kids. And so I have my nieces, and my nieces now are 10 and 8. Wait, 11 and 8. My older niece would be very offended that I just said 10. And so she was focused more on that. But now as they're getting older, she's like, hey, like, what do I want to start planning again? What do I want to start doing? But then like, obviously, pandemic. So now she's getting involved more of like, hey, do I want to help out with their school? Do I want to help out with a local temple? Like, do I want to do like part-time event management? Like, what do I want to do now? But like, she moved up there because her, like my brother-in-law is from there, and they've been dating since freshman year of college, and they got married after law school.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So she moved up there. And so I've kind of vicariously experienced the Bay Area through her lens.
Yeah.
And it's like I would be staying usually in like San Rafael, which like is just this, it felt just very sleepy, suburban, but also extraordinarily wealthy. And so that to me was a very interesting dichotomy of like, it was very unlike LA wealth, where it's like everybody up there pretends not to be wealthy, but pretends in the same way. It's very strange to me.
Yeah. It's very strange.
And then I watched, the city itself, where like I remember like playing shows at Viracocha and like being friends there, and like I enjoyed that portion of the city, and then it just changed so quickly. And like I don't have friends who live in the city anymore, frankly. I have a few friends in Oakland, but other than that, I used to have friends that lived in the city, and I simply don't. And it's not because I've ceased talking to people, it's because people have ceased living there.
Yeah, no one could have stayed there,
No. And so that's why I was curious, like what era of mission were you missioning?
It was 1997 to 2020.
Okay.
So it was like really right at basically like COVID ended everything,
Yeah.
But we were going to go out anyways, because I moved to LA, and the city was like, it was untenable, I mean, it's like, I don't think any arts business really could stay there without being like heavily subsidized,
That was the impression I got. Like one of my friends even asked, they're like, where do you even play in San Francisco anymore? And I genuinely didn't know. I was like, shrug.
Yeah, there's not, there whatever Viracocha was, which was great, it's gone. You know what I mean? Like anything like that is definitely gone. I mean, it's just like, to what happened in the mission in just in a 10-year span, it was like most US cities don't transform that much. You know what I mean? It's like just slower and I don't know, more messy, but it was crazy because, I was there every day driving through the mission, interacting in the mission and running a business there. And like to just see like something just get like, it's wild because it was like, you saw something just get like, hundreds of millions of dollars like injected into this really relatively small neighborhood that has like a 3-story building limit. It's like NIMBY Central, and everything that happened in the mission made it worse. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was like kind of strange to see that, like that there was so much money that came in, and I'm not even talking about like, like these rich people don't please me with their, AirPods or whatever. It was just that businesses, the vibe, the aesthetics, the overall happiness quotient of people walking down the street, like everything went to shit. You know what I mean? It was like, even like the newcomers that like lived in lofts on Valencia Street weren't happy. Like no one was happy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And that's so funny that you even said Valencia Street, because I was like, oh, one of my friends used to live there. Yeah. And it's like that. I remember reading an article quite a while ago that cited, and I don't know if the figure is still accurate, but they cited that it was $72,000, that was approximately the income at which happiness, when measured as like contentedness with life, just levels off in the US. And I'm curious what that number is currently, because that article was published a while ago. Like I remember that article a while ago, but there's a certain threshold at which once you have security and your needs met, that more money and more resources do not bring more happiness. It levels off. It doesn't necessarily drop, but like it just kind of like flatlines. It's not going to give you more happiness or more joy to have more of that, because you already have like the launch pad for, you know, fulfillment essentially. So you're not gonna just make more launch pads. Like and so that's interesting that you noted that it was even like the feeling of like people walking down the street, like they weren't happy.
They weren't happy. And it's like, because think about like, you know, that whole study, it's interesting because it does, I think that like, it just feels true, right? Because we've had more, you know, we've aspired towards something, right? You know, like what I think about me being like, peak ambition for me was like maybe 2008, 2009, 2010. That's when I was like, every like strand of my DNA was like trying hard to, you know, to get bigger, because I knew that like, if you don't level up in touring, if you don't get bigger in music, if you don't get more leverage, then you open up for bigger bands and you're like, oh shit, they're playing like small theaters. Like this is so much better than playing in a bar. And they have like, you know, they have like a monitor person and a front of house person. And like, you know, you start to like get these little like jumps that you want to make. And if you acquire any of those, like, you know, those level ups, right? They actually bring you sadness, because then you realize like how far you are from acquiring the level ups that you need to get to where you want to go. You know, it's like for me, like, you know, I started touring, you know, with the Mountain Goats early, and they were always like way bigger than me. So, and that caused me happiness, not resent. You know what I mean? I was like, this is beautiful. I love them. They make great records. They're beautiful people. But I want to get closer to there. You know what I mean? But like what happens, and I think that this probably happens with like wealth in general, as you're aspiring, those things that you're aspiring to are getting bigger. They're getting richer. You know what I mean? And you're creeping along in your own like little hobbled way, and you're never going to close the gap. Do you know what I mean? So it's like you're playing, it's a complete illusion, whatever game you're playing, because your needs, just like that 72,000, which is probably 100,000 now, you know, it's like, and adjusted for whatever city you're living in and whatever dystopian hellscape county of America is fucking you over at the moment. You know, I mean, you know, and like LA County is my county, but hey, I have food stamps and I have EBT. I mean, I have EBT and Medi-Cal. So California provides, you know what I mean? Like, so we got to give California that, but chasing those like markers for me, I remember the first time I was able to take a tour manager on tour. And it made me feel good for like 15 minutes. And then I was on to the next thing. And that's just, it's beautiful that that's human nature. It's okay. Do you know what I mean? But you need to acknowledge that like, whatever you're chasing, it's not happiness. You know what I mean? So don't think it is for a second. You know what I mean? It's not fulfillment, because that is community. That is a primary partner that you're in love with. That is like some basic ass shit that we've been doing for thousands of years. You know what I mean? That's like just being with people you love. So, you know, maybe we need to like simplify and wise up, and you know what I mean? And like, you know, external notches aren't going to do it.
Nope. Nope. I don't know if you saw my face, but I was just like, yes, that like speaks to it like that spoke to my heart and my body in a way that I was just like, yeah, that's the stuff that's important. Because like, you know, thinking about all of the markers that we have of success, even like looping back to what we were talking about initially about even like who's a villain. It's like those things are not going to bring you happiness, because ultimately, even in talking about addiction and stuff too, it's that connectedness. That's when you feel most at peace and most at home, is like when you feel connected.
100%.
And you can't like win connection through like your gold stars. Like you can't just be like, I got enough stars in the game of the music industry, so now I feel connected.
Like, yeah. It doesn't work that way.
No.
I mean, if it did, people who were like hella famous would be happy. Do you know what I mean? Like read an interview with Joni Mitchell. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't work that way.
No.
You know?
No. And like, having grown up here, I do sometimes forget. That's why I was curious where you grew up. Like, I didn't realize how like strange and rarefied LA was compared to other places. So I love that point of view that it takes up a lot of oxygen in the room. And I'm like, yeah, we kind of do.
Yeah.
But like having grown up here and meeting really a range of people and meeting people who are of a class of wealth that is quite extraordinary, going to school with them and stuff, it's like, I saw that can actually be like far more destructive than anything else.
Yeah.
And so it at least taught me a lot personally about my own aspirations and what I was aspiring to and why. Because I feel like I'm glad that I got that proximity. I did get the find out vicariously. I did not have to do the fuck around.
Yeah.
That like once you actually can see that, because yes, you can read interviews and it's like once you have that perspective, then you can adjust what you're aspiring to. Because I do think it is in human nature that we do look to the next thing. It's sometimes hard to celebrate like our victories or celebrate our connection, because we do want to do the next thing. The next thing's exciting.
And we don't want to face down the existential, issue that like I spent 4 years building a studio in Oakland, Tiny Telephone Oakland. I don't think I ever even opened a fucking Topo Chico to celebrate that thing. I mean, I remember, open on January 11th, like, 7 years ago. And I just think I just went to work the next morning. You know what I mean? I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And it fried my nervous system to build it. And it gave me like almost zero pleasure. I mean, that's not true. It gave me zero pleasure as like a marker of, it was just another like point on the map to completing this video game. And like, that's where I started getting like deeply alienated from ambition, deeply alienated from my own internal drive, which I do not believe in anymore at all. I literally don't fucking care about anything other than like being in love, petting my cats and hanging out with my friends. Don't care. Really don't care. I mean, I just got offered a tour that I may or may not take because I just don't, and I love the people that offered it to me, but I just don't want to be away from my girlfriend and I don't want to be away from my cats. And that's the truth. And it's not even that long of a tour. I'm just like a basic bitch.
I was talking to someone last night about like, where does like relationship fit in your pie? Like if you're dividing your pie into the different things. And what we were talking about is that I have a bigger pie slice currently for where I rank relationship.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay. But for me, that's what resonates. Yeah. And so like, I have to be in proximity to people that have the same pie slice.
Yes.
Because if they have too much pie slice, that can be like overwhelming for me. But if they have too little pie slice, then I'm like, oh, like, then you're not going to be as into this as I am.
Yes. Yep.
And so I'm not going to judge someone else's pie slice. Yeah. But like, I do feel that my current pie slice is in alignment with what you said of just like, what are the things that do bring me the most fulfillment? Yeah. And it's like, my relation to others, like I feel very fortunate for the relationships that I have. And so that is why they're, I wouldn't say it's like the whole pie. It's a pretty reasonable slice.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it's like, if that's your pie slice, like that's your pie slice. That's what brings you happiness. That's where you're at. I'm just like, thumbs up for that.
100%.
Like that's
100%.
That's it right there. You don't want to like ruin that. I remember reading that like Fiona Apple was, not going on tour because she was caring for her elderly dog. And I was like, wow, I respect the heck out of that. Yeah. Like, because that's something you're never going to get back. Not that you'd ever get like tour back. It's not like every single tour date's the same or, things like that. But it's like those relationships are things that you can't replace those. You're never going to get that experience again. And it's like, that's extraordinarily personally valuable. So honor that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Thank you for being so generous with your time today. I was like, speaking of relating.
No, this is great. Listen, this is what we're here for. It was amazing to be off the grid of like the usual structured conversation. It's like a relief to just, because like, I know who I am. I don't want to talk about myself. Do you know, I'm not a narcissist. You know what I mean? Like, why would I want to just like keep talking about the same stuff? Like,
yeah.
Why do I don't even want to talk about like, like everyone makes a record. I just made the record. Why would I want to talk about it? You know what I mean? Like I want to talk
I already did the thing. Go enjoy the thing.
The whole point is that you do it and then you just move on. You know what I mean? It feels like a little strange to be like, I mean, it exists. It's right there. You know what I mean? Like you want to engage with it. Like It's not I didn't make a record to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like it's just listen to it. I don't know. Okay. You're awesome.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of Why Not Both? If you liked what you heard, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on your preferred podcast platform. You can also come hang out with us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, both on Instagram and on Twitter. This season, we are brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. Under the Radar is a nationally distributed print, music, and entertainment magazine and website. You can find them at www.undertheradarmag.com and feel free to support them on Patreon. Extra special thanks to our producer, Laura Studeris, who is literally a rock star. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.